U.S. We need to encourage that path.
Yep. John Meacham's with us. John.
Admiral, in the spirit of testing the momentary passion versus long-term impact, what's your sense of where the reaction to within the alliance to Helsinki, to Trump's performance at the NATO summit, which I guess has been now 3 weeks, it feels like, both yesterday and 3 years ago. But as the fallout unfolds, what's your sense of the lasting impact of that performance in Europe?
It's all part, John, of these kind of centrifugal forces that I feel pulling not only at the NATO alliance, but at the idea of the transatlantic bond. That creaking sound you hear is the transatlantic bridge. And every performance, not only at the NATO summit, but at, for example, the G7 in Charlevoix in Canada, President Trump kind of twists that bridge a bit. At the same time, Turkey pulling away. Italy has an election and elects someone who is opposed to the European Union. We continue to see these right-wing movements in Hungary, in Poland, still bubbling in France. It's centrifugal force, John, pulling apart our greatest pool of allies and partners. And to lose Turkey would be a geopolitical mistake of epic proportions. Hopefully we can pull them back, but Turkey has to make the first step at this point.
So, John, it really is. It's hard to keep track of Donald Trump. You know, whether you talk about him seeming to bow and scrape to Vladimir Putin, but then pushing some very tough policies against Russia. The same with North Korea. But here again, we have Turkey, who's been a troubled ally for about a decade now. And you're concerned at first when he's too chummy with the autocrat, but then he goes in the opposite direction and actually causes some pretty grave risks to our alliance. There never seems to be any middle ground.
No, and I'd feel better, and I suspect you would too, if I believed that there was any coherence to this, if there was a strategy behind it. I think the president's basically an open synapse, and he just reacts to whatever stimuli comes in at a given moment. One of the most important things I think about this era is it is a break, as much as as many of the forces that are echoed now have a precedent in the American past. What is different is that from 1932 to 2016, our politics was shaped by a figurative conversation between FDR and Reagan. We had a debate over the relative role of the market versus the state and the relative projection of power against commonly agreed upon foes. What did change with the election of Donald Trump is this is not a coherent chapter in that conversation, and it's all mixed up right now with nationalism and xenophobia and a kind of incoherence. And I think the incoherence and the instability is what is the real national security threat going forward.
And at the end of the day, you're exactly right. There is no understanding of precedent looking back, and there is absolutely no process in handling these foreign policy issues moving forward. And it's a real challenge for us, and it's why we dart around as a country now as much as we do in the age of Trump. Coming up, the president says he only hires the best people, but now he's calling one of them a lowlife. And the story about Mike Flynn changes again. What Rudy Giuliani now says about the conversation between the president and James Comey in the Oval Office, here's a hint. It's different than what he was saying just a couple of weeks ago, and he's shocked that anyone would remember that. Morning Joe, we'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to Morning Joe. It's Monday, August the 13th. Still with us, we have national affairs analyst for NBC News and MSNBC, John Heilman, professor at Princeton University, columnist for Time Magazine, and author of the book Democracy in Black, Eddie Glaude Jr., NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent and host of KCDC, where they play nothing but, wow, still no Dave Matthews Band. Casey Hunt. And joining the conversation, we have chief national correspondent for the New York Times Magazine, Mark Leibovich, and political reporter for the Washington Post and MSNBC political analyst Robert Costa. He's the moderator, of course, of Washington Week. on PBS. And Bob, let me start with you. Just about the craziness that happened this weekend. Yesterday, Omarosa's on Meet the Press, and we find out there that she actually, after being taken into the Situation Room, records a conversation in there, which of course is one of many breaches that seem to occur in that White House every day. But the chaos continues. Here's somebody that Donald Trump's been close with for well over a decade, and she's claiming that he uses the N-word, claiming quite a few things. But again, the big takeaway, that she's recording the conversation of the chief of staff as he's firing her in the Situation Room.
I was struck, Joe, by my conversation with a different range of sources on this. White House officials, people who are part of the Republican Party establishment, they're taken aback by what Ms. Manigault-Newman is doing with her book. They say she has no credibility. Yet when you call longtime friends of President Trump, people who've been at that 26th floor on Trump Tower and seen the kind of people coming in and out, seen then businessman Donald Trump shouting at his assistants for a Diet Coke, asking, threatening friends and enemies that they could be recorded. They've shrugged at this book in a sense. They say this is how it's always been in Trump world, a mix of celebrity, politics, ego, and business, and it continues today. It's the White House officials who don't really know what to make of it and are struck by it.
That haven't been, John Heilman, that haven't seen Donald Trump in action at Trump Tower. It's a sight to behold. But you now have, though, one of his longest TV partners in Omarosa, and also his fixer, his attorney fixer. Right. Both of them would record Donald Trump all the time. It's almost as if they knew, like Monica Lewinsky, that they had to preserve the evidence.
Yeah, people who've known Trump for a long time. These are people who are not new to him. They're people who, as Bob said, not just were familiar, have been in that office, but were familiar with the kind of modus vivendi, the modus operandi of Donald Trump as he moved through the world. I think that a lot of them recognize that the loyalty that they were expected to give to Donald Trump might not be returned to them fully in the future, and that they needed to have some kind of insurance policy against that. There are also people who were demonstrably trying, and again, this doesn't excuse anything about Donald Trump, but they were also, in Michael Cohen's case and in Omarosa's case, people who were trying to use their relationship with Donald Trump to try to profit one way or the other, either financially, reputationally, in terms of their status in the world. These are not people who were not self-interested. And so, again, you look at many of the things she says about Donald Trump come as news to no one. The notion that Donald Trump is a racist, that he says racist things. This is the furthest thing from breaking news in the world. But I think you look at her and you say that this is someone who was using Donald Trump just as Donald Trump was using her. The nature of the transaction was clear to both of them. The notion that she's claiming now, that she suddenly looked up very late in her time and realized that she was complicit in having given him racial cover. She knew from the very beginning that that's what she was there to do. This is not a stupid person. This is a person with maybe no conscience, no soul, and no ethics, but she's not a person with no brain. And she knew what her role was. She used it. She embraced it. And then when it was time to go, she's now taking advantage of the opportunity to cash in. And, is she laying bare some things about Donald Trump? She is. But none of them are news to anyone who's been paying attention over the course of the